Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. I'm Shannon Zeman, and thank you for joining us today on the most important 15 minutes of your day, where we share expert information on safety and preparedness that you can use in your everyday life. Alcohol's impact on your body starts from the moment you take your first sip. Joining us today is Officer Bill Hume, who has been a police officer for over 13 years and is a drug recognition specialist. One of Officer Hume's expertise is DUI. He has been teaching law enforcement and civilians around the United States on this topic for over 10 years. So today, Bill is here, and he's going to help us understand the effects of alcohol that it has on our bodies and why it's dangerous to drive while under the influence. So thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me. I appreciate it.
One of my favorite people to have on here. Bill always has so much information. And I asked Bill to join us because everybody knows that you should not drive while you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. But there's so much more to it for us to understand the reasonings and to really, I guess, do it. To really know why it's so important. So let's dive right in. How does alcohol affect the development on kids and young adults?
Well, thanks for asking, Shannon. Thank you again for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I think this is a very important question that you're asking about our kids. We all have young kids at home, and that's usually people's biggest question because alcohol starts at such an early age and in the household and in the example that we set as parents for our kids.
Right.
Now, we know that the human brain obviously doesn't fully develop until the age of 25 years old. However, alcohol is what we call a central nervous system depressant, and it has addictive properties to that chemical. So in our younger generation of adults that are younger than 25, we're introducing a drug into their body that has addictive properties that could lead to a lifetime long addiction to alcohol. So it's very important that we set that example, obviously, as parents to our kids and teach them the dangers of alcohol. And something else I'll add to that too is it can stunt the brain growth in our kids, which a lot of people don't realize. At that young early age, these kids are consuming alcohol and they're actually affecting the development of their brain. So this is a central nervous system depressant. It slows that electrical activity of the brain. Imagine your brain as a computer, and we're introducing something into that computer that slows it down almost like a virus. Now that brain is still trying to develop and grow and get stronger. And in our kids, when we introduce alcohol or something addictive like alcohol or a depressant, we're actually stunning the growth of that brain development at an early age.
Wow. And I love how you put that in the perspective of a computer, because we can understand that. Anybody can understand that. Wow, I didn't even know about it. It makes sense it could stunt the growth. But again, like we're saying, I didn't know it. So that's perfect. So let's go away from, youth and just say, what are does it affect men and women differently?
Yes, it does. It's funny in the DUI world, we do see a lot more DUIs with men that are driving down the road, and men, it's because of our ego. So we're driving and we say, I'm okay. I've had a couple drinks, but I'm going to drive anyways. And that's usually why we see more men getting arrested for DUI. But in reality, women are actually getting intoxicated faster. And that's because of the water content inside of their bodies. Women actually hold more water content inside of their body. And for that reason, they actually get drunker faster.
So why is that? You would think, because if you water down a drink, it doesn't affect you as much. So I'm just playing, but why is that? Why does the water content matter?
So the water content is very important because that's what affects our blood alcohol content, or what we call the 0.08 per se limit of alcohol. So it's very, very important when we're introducing a foreign chemical like alcohol into that water content of the body. The female is actually going to get drunker faster. And that's what we found a lot. So if, 2 drinks to a man and 2 drinks to a woman, they're actually going to be completely different on what their blood alcohol levels are going to be. Very slightly, but the woman will actually be intoxicated a little bit quicker.
Oh, even if they're like equal weight,
yes.
It will do. See, that's why we have Bill here, is to educate us on these things. So I like it. And then, okay, so how do we decipher, we're too drunk to drive?
Well, that's a good question. So a lot of people like to debate this question, especially with police officers when you get pulled over at the side of the road. They say, when is too drunk to drive? And our biggest thing is if you feel buzzed or you feel different, you shouldn't be driving. There's a lot of people that are out there driving on the roads that are innocent, that just want to get from point A to point B, families, kids, all our loved ones are on the road.
Mhm.
So if you feel different, obviously alcohol is affecting the way that you operate that vehicle going down the road, your fine motor movements, your vision, everything that you look at. So in our opinion, too drunk to drive is if you feel any different than you normally do sober, you should not be driving.
Mhm. Well, that's a great perspective. It's hard to kind of examine. I mean, usually for me, it's if I have anything to drink, then it's too much. But definitely putting in that perspective, because everybody wants to get home, right?
Yes.
Everybody wants to get home. So, and you did mention it just a minute ago, but what is the 0.08 BAC? What does that really mean? And what?
So a 0.08 is the per se limit in almost all 50 states. And so everyone hears 0.08 and they think, okay, that's the limit where I have to be, where I'm going to get arrested for DUI. So 0.08, that means it's a per se limit. Everyone is deemed intoxicated or too drunk to drive at a 0.08, no matter if you're a male, female, how long you've been drinking, whatever age, you're deemed intoxicated to drive at that point. So no debating it. Science says everybody at a 0.08 is too drunk to drive. But it brings up a good point, Shannon, because everyone's body takes alcohol differently. So an example is if you're not a big drinker, you don't drink a lot, and you have 2 drinks and you feel very buzzed, very intoxicated, you might not be at a 0.08. And if I put you behind the wheel, you'd obviously show signs and symptoms of being impaired driving down the road. So you could be at a 0.07, 0.06, 0.05 and still get arrested for a DUI at that point. That's just a per se limit is what they list in the states is, hey, this is where every person is deemed too intoxicated to drive, but you can still get arrested below 0.08.
And what would be as you pulling someone over and they are under 0.08, but you can tell that they are too intoxicated to drive? What are those signs that you're noticing or seeing? Like, how can we identify those also?
So when people act differently in their body behaviors, their physiology, and their driving pattern, it's very, very evident. I'll give you a real life example. We had a lady in the agency that I work for was going down the road and she got in a car crash. She had a very serious car crash, slammed into the back of another car, never drinks, maybe every 6 months or so. And she came out, she did very poorly on the field sobriety test. She had bad driving because of her car crash and she blew a 0.06. And she injured people in this car crash, but a 0.06 to her was very intoxicated for her body. So at that point, she was arrested for a DUI. But everyone thinks, hey, there's this magic number, 0.08, I have to be at that where I'm going to get arrested. And that's not really the case. You can get arrested below 0.08 if you still show signs and symptoms of that impairment as you're driving.
That's great, because like you're saying, we're assuming as civilians that that's like that number, which one, I would have assumed I was at that number if I was impaired anyways, but that you can still get arrested. So that's really interesting, even if you're below it. So why does alcohol affect your ability to drive a vehicle?
I think this goes back to talking about the brain. So the biggest thing is all of our brains are like a big computer, and alcohol slows down that electrical activity of the brain. Alcohol is what we call a central nervous system depressant. So it slows down everything in our brain. Now, obviously, the functions of our central nervous system are very important when we drive going down the road. We have to react to cars, pedestrians, limit lines, signals, all this processing going through our brain when we're driving that people don't think about. So many things are going through your mind. Your hands are on the steering wheel. You're processing things with your eyes, the street signs, the people ahead of you, how you're feeling, the temperature, the radio, all these things. Now, when we introduce a substance like alcohol, we're slowing down those processes. So your reaction times of seeing a pedestrian in the road, a green light or red light, whatever it is that you're reacting to, it really affects that. And another point to that being the fine motor skills of the body as well. So if you can imagine, obviously you and I have kids, but when the kids are younger and we're trying to teach them to pick things up, right? That's the fine motor skills that we have. Alcohol affects that in human adults. And that's why you see these people that are wobbly, can't grab stuff. It's affecting those fine motor skills, which are so important when we're driving a car. Just that little glitch of the steering wheel going left and right, not being able to stay in your lane. It's so, so important. And it's very, very dangerous when it's introduced with somebody that's driving a car.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's so important for people to know that, we're not saying that you're weak or that you can't handle things, but the most important thing is getting home And just even that one drink can impair you in some fashion. So
Yes.
it's very important. So doing this whole topic, I think it's really interesting. And there's a lot of things that I don't understand. And my husband's a police officer, you know, and he'll talk and it's like, whoo, over my head. So what would be either going back to something that we just talked about or another kind of takeaway maybe that you would want to share with us on this?
I think the biggest takeaway for us is, people think in law enforcement that we go out and we do DUI enforcement because it's fun that we're going out and we're in people's lives. But in reality, I mean, we are going out to the front lines and we are seeing these horrific car crashes. The end result of those being that we have to go to these families and tell them what happened at the end of the day. And those are memories and things that stick with us the rest of our lives. People go out and, I've had people that I've arrested say, I really hope you're proud of yourself as I'm taking you to jail. And I said, you know what, we'll never know the impact that we make with DUI enforcement or the education aspect of that. When we go out and we teach schools, we teach our young education, we'll never see what the repercussions of that are, where that goes out. But we know that we're making a difference by teaching people not to drive under the influence, because we don't want people to die at the end of the day. We want to keep our roads safer. We want everyone to go home safely at the end of the day. We want our kids to thrive at a later date and not have to worry about, leaving home to go to a school event and getting injured or killed by a drunk driver.
Right.
And those, like I said, those are just invisible lines we'll never see, but it's very, very important to us as law enforcement, and we take it very, very seriously.
Right. And it's very true how hard it is for, not just the people that are in the accident that are being affected, but the police officers and all the first responders that, have to deal with all the repercussions of it and everything. It's just so important to know that, alcohol is, I like alcohol. I think it's wonderful when we're hanging out with friends and stuff like that. And it has its great, moments where you are, but just to spend the money to have someone pick you up or, have a DD designated or things like, there are all these great steps that we can, utilize, and then also educate our children and support people and everything like that in that too. So I think that's a wonderful point. And I would love to just go back one more time on how you were talking about the difference in men and women and the alcohol, because I think that is so fascinating about how there is I thought the difference was because men, were built different, so they could handle a little bit more.
So women, actually, like I was saying, they get intoxicated faster. A lot of it goes back to because the woman body is prepared for childbirth. So the way that your body is actually made with the water content and fat content, unfortunately, women have a higher fat content in their bodies just naturally.
It's just not fair.
And because of that, and because of the way that body is developed naturally, that's just the way it is. They get drunker faster. And we actually see it during our wet lab experiments that we do. When we go out, we do these scientific studies where we have men and women drink and we look at their impairment levels, and you actually see that these women get intoxicated faster than men. But it is funny at certain points where people hit between that like 0.04 to 0.07 impairment, they're like, oh, I definitely wouldn't drive. But something happens with the brain with the woman and the men. When they hit a 0.08 and above, that impairment, as it gets higher, they go, no, you know what? I think I'm going to make it. I think I would drive at this point. And you're like, oh no, please don't drive.
And it does, like, for some people, that making that deciding factor of should I or shouldn't I? And I just think if you ever think should I or shouldn't I, no, you shouldn't.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
100%.
That would be the best and safest decision. So I really appreciate you being with us.
Thank you,
Bill,
Shannon.
and teaching us all about this education of alcohol. And I think we could sit here and talk about many, many more time, all this interesting facts and keeping us safe. And thank you so much for your service and all the hard work you do out there.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, always. And so next week, it's going to be kind of fun. So Detective Troy Zeman is going to be back joining me to examine the dangers regarding cell phones that we face on a daily basis. So thank you so much for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You've just been listening to the most important 15 minutes of your day with me, Shannon Zeman. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And remember, with knowledge, you have the power.